Agatha Christie, when she killed off Poirot, she wrote, like, in the middle of her life when she was working as a dispensary in World War II in London. She wrote the last Poirot novel because she was heartily sick and tired of him, having written him from 1927, having
Yeah.
written books about him up until 1945. She was over him. She wanted other avenues, and so she wrote the last Poirot, and she put it aside. She gave it to a publisher and said, "Put this in a safe and don't publish it until I'm dead." But she was very clear that she wanted to kill Poirot. That's it, no more. She was over
Uh-huh.
him, and she was like the last Curtain, the last Poirot novel. She was pretty much at the height of her powers, and that is an amazing book. When you follow, if you're a Poirot fan, following from the initial Poirot book, like the Mysterious Affair at Styles, I think it was. He's he's this weird agglomeration of tics and weird attitudes that doesn't really make sense. 5 novels later, he starts to calm down and become a real human being, and then by the time you get to Curtain, that's a that's just it's as a portrait of an old man who's facing the end with this huge moral crisis and having his entire physical being falling apart underneath him while he's trying to get this last thing done. It's a masterful work. It's amazing. Agatha Christie is notable for having written for some of the best books of the Western canon. She wrote The Death of Roger Ackroyd, for example, which is the first novel of that kind. I'm not going to spoil it at all, but she uses a technique. There's some question about this, but she's the first one to publish using that technique in a thriller novel. The Murder on the Orient Express, that was a masterful work. And then there were none. I'm not going to use the original name. That was like the first time that had been done.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, she wrote like really masterfully all through her life, and she put a full stop right at the end of Poirot in 1945, and she said, "Don't." And now today we're getting sequels because some idiot publisher somewhere has said, no, Poirot's up for grabs. He's free game. Let's just get someone to write more Poirot novels. I'm appalled. It's awful. It's the biggest act of treachery I've ever seen. So yeah, I don't go near those new books. I hate them without even reading them.
I understand. I understand. Um, but there is this sort of so in the 70s, late 70s, this kind of adoption of fan fiction was very underground.
Yep.
And I feel that in the last 40 years, what has happened is, or even 50 years, what's happened is that fan fiction has come very mainstream. Like, I think that the first time we really saw that was 50 Shades of Grey, which is a
Yes.
Twilight fan fiction, which she just changed the characters' names and made them rich instead of a vampire. Um, and yeah, because you do. And yeah, and now that's what we're getting. And look, I kind, I'm not. I've written a Cinderella story in the past. Like I'm not immune to writing fan fiction. But
Yeah, I'm
what
writing my own
makes
Batman comic.
yeah, oh my goodness, my dream is to write a Batman movie. Um, but like what do authors need to do now to create something like, or are we just um like he says in Before Sunrise, he says that if we're all being reincarnated, I don't know if I believe in reincarnation, but if we're all being reincarnated, there are so many more of us now than there used to be. Does that mean all our souls are getting divided up? Like, are we just not as creative? Are we just not as good as Agatha Christie and these other great people who created these amazing characters? Are we just not as good?
I think I think there are great writers out there. I think what we're seeing is an unprecedented period where one, publishers want massive amounts of content, and two, everyone's got access to a word processing computer.
Uh-huh.
Everyone can write. Everyone can put keys under their fingers and get something going. There's a lot. I mean, self-publishing as well on this is the third sort of pinnacle to that. We can copy pretty much everything, anything. We can take, like, reformat whatever we like. We can all pump it out. Like, we can all, like, put words into our computers and print them off or send them off to publishers. And if they don't pick it up, we can always self-publish. So there's an unprecedented level of access to the publishing world. And we're kind of spoiled for choice in getting our work out there, but I think we're also limiting ourselves by just looking at what's already out there and deciding that that's what I want to write.
Poirot, as you say, he had a couple of quirks, but he was just like a really good detective. He would, he didn't have like this heaps of crazy backstory. He wasn't like trying to make his mommy proud or something. He wasn't, didn't have childhood trauma. He just like got on with it. Do you think that all this like nuancing is making characters more human-like? Like, you think the nuancing of these characters is possibly why they're not, they're forgettable? Because they're just like a person, like that's a horrible thought. Because I want to write a really rich, wonderful character that's complicated. But maybe that complication makes them less memorable. Does that make sense?
I think the way to look at it is to re-examine the origins, like the earliest writings of those canon characters. I think, yes, in one sense, you can look at them as being fairly sketchy to start off with, but then becoming more defined across the career of the author. And like I said, that happens with Poirot. He's just an agglomeration of weird tics and attitudes in his first book. But there's a point when Agatha Christie goes, oh, in her head, like a light bulb goes off, and she goes, I know who this guy is. She actually wrote herself into some of her Poirot books. There are a couple of reasons for that. She used to have conversations she's in her diaries and her discussions with her friends. She used to talk about talking to Poirot. She would actually sit there in her study and she would have conversations with him, to the point where she just kind of she decided to jump the fence and actually be in the book with him. So he's got a lady novelist, a woman who writes detective novels, a character called Ariadne Oliver. This latest movie that came out, the latest Kenneth Branagh one, it's based on Halloween Party, and it's one of the novels where Ariadne Oliver spends a lot of time talking to Poirot and helping him solve the case. But that character, Ariadne Oliver, is Agatha Christie. It's her under a false name. She does all the things that Agatha Christie did in real life. She's got this obsession with apples. Agatha Christie loved apples. She's a large woman, a large blousy kind of figure. And yeah, that's Agatha Christie. And she put herself in the book so that she could talk through the book the crime with Hercule Poirot. Eventually, like I said, she got sick and tired of Poirot because he was constantly in her brain all the time. She just wanted to get rid of him. But there's a point, like 3 or 4 novels in, where the switch gets clicked and she understands absolutely who he is as a person, and he becomes real to Agatha anyway. And it's the same with all those characters. They seem kind of light in the early iterations and the early appearances, but fundamentally within those characters and their construction, within the author's mind, there's depth and there's longevity.